Danger is building across the middle of the United States right now, and the next 3 days are going to get rough. This is not a small, ordinary system passing through. This is the kind of setup that can bring real damage, real flooding, and real danger to a lot of people at once. We are heading into a dangerous stretch of summer weather with violent storms, flash flooding, and heat that could put lives at risk, all hitting at the same time. If you live anywhere from the plains through the Midwest and into the Appalachians, you need to hear this. Let's get straight into it. Today, the danger starts with a line of thunderstorms stretching from the northern and central plains all the way down through the Carolinas. These are not normal summer storms. We could see large hail, damaging wind gusts, and even a tornado spinning up with little warning. At the same time, a separate threat is building over the Appalachians, where the ground is already soaked and rivers are already high, and more rain is about to fall right on top of that. Tomorrow, this whole system shifts and gets stronger. The threat expands into the Midwest, where powerful supercell thunderstorms are expected to fire up in the afternoon and evening. And on top of that, a dangerous heat dome is building over the southern plains and the southwest, bringing some brutal temperatures. This week is shaping up to be one of the most active stretches we have seen in a while, so let's break it down. Right now, the biggest concern is a zone running from Minnesota down into central Nebraska, where there is a slight risk of severe thunderstorms. There's a second area of concern near the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina, and this one matters even more because of what already happened. Over the last 24 hours, catastrophic flooding hit parts of West Virginia and southern Ohio, and now more rain is coming down on ground that cannot take any more water. On top of that, fresh, severe thunderstorms will build through the day-to-day, making an already bad situation worse. But the sharpest edge of today's threat is out in the central and northern plains. This is where the most dangerous storms are expected to form. Damaging wind gusts of 60 to 75 miles per hour are possible, strong enough to snap tree limbs, knock down power lines, and throw around anything that is not tied down. There's also a real risk of large hail, especially from central Nebraska up toward Sioux Falls. The atmosphere today is loaded for it. Temperatures are dropping fast with height, and that is exactly the setup that fuels violent hailstorms through the afternoon and evening. And if any storm taps into a stronger wind flow this evening, we could see an isolated tornado or two, most likely along the corridor from Interstate 80 up towards Sioux Falls. If you are in that zone, today is a day to stay alert and have a plan ready. As bad as today looks, tomorrow, Tuesday, could turn into something much bigger. A deepening area of low pressure is going to push over the Rockies, and behind it, a warm sector is going to build and strengthen. A warm sector is basically a pocket of warm, moist air trapped ahead of the system, and combined with a strengthening warm front, it creates the perfect setup for strong wind shear. That shear is the key ingredient, because it is what turns ordinary storms into rotating, long-lasting, dangerous supercells. Because of all this coming together, Tuesday has a real shot at becoming a significant, severe weather outbreak. Right now, forecasters have placed a slight risk over Omaha, Des Moines, and Kansas City, with a marginal risk from Milwaukee back to Springfield, Illinois. The main concern there is damaging wind, and this is not a small threat. We could see gusts near 80 miles per hour tomorrow afternoon and evening, strong enough to cause real damage. Large hail is also possible, and depending on how the storms evolve through the day, there's a real chance this risk gets upgraded further. On top of the wind and hail threat, there's also a tornado risk, mainly near Omaha, Lincoln, Manhattan, Kansas City, and St. Joseph. As we get closer to the event and confidence grows, that risk area could expand into another dangerous tornado corridor. Now, let's talk timing, because knowing exactly when the danger arrives near you could matter a lot. Starting with today along the East Coast, storms should fire up over Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia somewhere between 3 and 5 o'clock Eastern Time. On a normal summer day, these would just be typical quick-hitting thunderstorms. But if any of them organize into a cluster, there is a real chance of a damaging wind threat near Pikeville and Knoxville. Then, between 6 and 7 o'clock, a long stretch of showers and storms is expected from Roanoke all the way to Chattanooga. Inside that line, winds of 60 to 65 miles per hour are possible, along with isolated large hail, and even a brief tornado risk cannot be ruled out. Outside of those specific spots, the main story is simply a lot of storms and a lot of lightning. If you have outdoor plans today, make sure you have a way to get weather alerts, especially if you are somewhere exposed like an outdoor event. Meanwhile, over the Great Plains, showers and storms will start developing as early as 3 to 4 o'clock over Minnesota, with isolated hail and wind possible right from the start. But this region is the main area everyone should be watching for severe weather today. That low-pressure system will push over the Rockies late tonight, but even before it arrives, there is already a real chance of every type of severe weather hazard showing up in this zone. To understand how loaded this atmosphere is, just look at the instability numbers. Just west of Sioux Falls, we are talking about instability values pushing past 4,000 joules per kilogram. That is a massive amount of fuel for storms today. Even so, if tornadoes do form, the areas around Rapid City and Gordon are less likely to see them directly. The stronger. Tornado potential sits further east, where wind shear lines up better to support rotation. Storms near Rapid City this afternoon are more likely to bring large hail and damaging downburst winds rather than tornadoes. But if storms fire up near Sioux Falls this evening, that is the zone to watch closely for an isolated tornado. As we move into the late evening and overnight hours, this activity should start falling apart. And then Tuesday brings a whole new round of severe weather. Here's the tricky part, though. What happens today directly shapes what happens tomorrow. Tonight's storm activity really matters because if leftover storms push further south and east overnight, that could actually lower tomorrow morning's threat. It is a complicated forecast with a lot of moving pieces, but current models show storms continuing through the early to mid-afternoon tomorrow, mostly producing isolated damaging wind gusts. Then, right around 6 to 7 o'clock tomorrow evening. Storms are expected to fire up almost everywhere across the region at once. That evening window is going to be the main period to watch for very large hail, destructive wind, and possibly a couple of tornadoes. Near Minneapolis and Appleton, the main concern looks like elevated hail activity, with only a low tornado risk depending on how storms move through southern Minnesota. After sunset, this activity should turn into an organized line of storms as it moves toward Kansas City and Columbia, bringing a significant wind threat with it. Overnight, there is also a real flash flood concern near Topeka and Kansas City if storms develop the way current projections show. By Wednesday morning, that line should start weakening as it moves into the Ozarks. If you're anywhere in that Kansas City to Columbia corridor tomorrow night, this is the kind of setup where you do not want to be caught driving through low areas after dark. Flash flooding at night is especially dangerous because it is much harder to see how deep or fast the water actually is, and a lot of people underestimate a flooded stretch of road simply because they cannot judge it well in the dark. If you can avoid travel through that window, that is the safer call. But that is not the end of it. On Wednesday, attention shifts to the Ohio Valley, where storms are expected to develop with isolated hail and wind, plus a brief tornado risk on the table. The peak window looks to fall between 3 and 8 o'clock. If you live near Detroit, Fort Wayne, Cleveland, or even out towards Scranton, stay alert during that window for damaging wind gusts and isolated hail. There's also a low tornado risk just south of Lake Erie, with Akron and Cleveland looking like the most likely spot for a brief tornado. As we move into Wednesday night, this activity should weaken a lot. Separately, over the Central Plains, there is once again a threat of severe storms Wednesday, though nothing too unusual for mid-August. Expect the usual combination of hail, damaging wind, and plenty of lightning. On top of all this severe weather is a serious and growing flash flood threat, with the worst of it falling on Tuesday and Wednesday. Today, the immediate danger is over West Virginia, Ohio, and Western Virginia, where there is a slight risk of excessive rainfall. A lot of flash flood warnings already went out overnight because of how much rain fell there recently. Tomorrow, that flood risk shifts west into the Midwest and Central Plains, with Des Moines, Davenport, Quincy, Danville, and Omaha all needing to watch for flooded roads, which becomes more likely by late afternoon and evening. It is still too early to give exact rainfall numbers for Iowa and Nebraska, since there is uncertainty in how tomorrow's storms evolve. That said, blended model guidance is currently pointing toward 1 to 2 inches of rain near Des Moines, with a real chance that some isolated spots could see a lot more, possibly 4 to 5 inches. That kind of rain falling fast is more than enough to flood roads. Back over the Appalachians, another ½ inch to inch and a half of rain is expected on top of what already fell, and given the steep terrain there, it does not take much more rain to trigger fresh flooding. If you are anywhere near Interstate 79 or Interstate 81 today, treat this as a serious, ongoing threat through the afternoon and evening. Ground that has already taken in as much water as it can hold has nowhere left to send new rain except sideways, across roads, into low areas and into creeks that can rise from nothing to a raging current in minutes. That is exactly the setup over West Virginia, southern Ohio, and the Appalachian corridor right now. A flooded road that looks fine on the surface can hide a washed-out section underneath, or a current strong enough to sweep a car off the road completely. The same logic applies out toward Des Moines, Davenport, and Omaha tomorrow, where a few inches of rain in a short window could turn normal streets into real hazards fast. It helps to understand why storms behave differently depending on how they organize. A storm that stays on its own, separate from other storms, has more room to spin and is more likely to produce a tornado. A storm that joins up with others into a line usually shifts its main danger to straight-line wind, often across a much wider area. That is the exact question hanging over tomorrow's forecast for Omaha, Des Moines, and Kansas City. If storms stay separate through the afternoon, the tornado risk becomes the bigger story. If they merge into a line by evening, like they often do, the wind threat becomes the dominant one, possibly affecting a much bigger stretch of land with those 80-mile-per-hour gusts. Either way, the atmosphere has more than enough energy to support something serious, and that instability number, over 4,000 joules per kilogram, tells you just how much fuel is sitting there waiting. It is also worth knowing why forecasters keep saying confidence will grow or shrink as we get closer to the event. Weather models are constantly pulling in new data, and a forecast made 2 days out will always carry more uncertainty than one made 6 hours out. That is not the models being wrong, that is just how a constantly shifting atmosphere works. It is why a slight risk today can turn into an enhanced risk by tomorrow morning, and why a narrow tornado corridor right now could widen by afternoon. The smart move is not to wait for a perfect forecast, because that does not exist. It is to keep checking updates, especially tomorrow, when so much depends on how tonight's storms behave overnight. Now let's zoom out to what happens after this stretch, because it is easy to get so focused on the next 48 hours that we lose sight of where the whole pattern is heading. Heading into Wednesday and Thursday, the storm system driving all this severe weather across the Central Plains and Ohio Valley will start to weaken and shift east. There is still some chance of leftover severe weather Wednesday, mainly over the Ohio Valley and maybe back into Nebraska and Kansas. By Thursday and Friday, no organized severe weather threats are expected, giving the atmosphere a short break. But that calm will not last, because by the weekend into early next week, attention turns to the Great Lakes, where a weak low-pressure system is expected to pass through, possibly sparking another round of severe weather. Overall, the middle and end of the week should be quieter and more scattered compared to what is unfolding right now. One more thing worth understanding before we move on is how this whole pattern connects together like a chain. The same low-pressure system driving tomorrow's severe weather is also the one shifting the flash flood risk west into the Midwest. The same cold front punching through on Wednesday is also the one pushing the heat back south for a couple of days before it rebuilds. None of these pieces are separate stories. They are all part of one large moving system, and that is part of why this stretch of days feels so active. When a system this strong sets up, it does not just bring one hazard, it drags several along with it at the same time, and that is exactly what is happening this week. Let's also check in on the tropics, since there has not been much talk about them lately. Tropical systems can go from nothing to a real threat in just a couple of days, so even a quiet week does not mean we can fully ignore that part of the forecast. A hurricane recently came close to hitting the big island of Hawaii, and even without a direct hit, it brought catastrophic flooding. Meanwhile, out in the Atlantic, conditions are extremely hostile to tropical development right now. Wind shear is unusually high, basically acting like a wall blocking any organized system from forming. It is a huge amount of shear for this point in the season. Even so, the Atlantic still deserves attention because there is a decent chance of 1 or 2 more tropical waves before the month ends, with some potential for development. Right now, the odds of that happening are low. The odds of anything actually hitting the United States are even lower, mostly because of that same wind shear. But it only takes one system. If a tropical storm or hurricane found its way into the Gulf, it could explode in strength given how warm the water is and how favorable the environment is. Right now, the only things keeping us safe are dry air and wind shear, and both are doing their job. That balance can shift quickly, though, so this is one part of the forecast worth checking back on later in the month, even if today it looks calm. Before we move to heat, it is worth being clear about why flash flooding gets underestimated so often. People picture severe weather as wind smashing windows or a tornado tearing through a street, and those images grab attention on their own. But flash flooding is quieter, and that is what makes it dangerous. Most flood deaths happen in cars, when someone tries to cross water that looks shallow but is actually moving fast and hiding a washed-out road underneath. It only takes about a foot of moving water to sweep a car off the road. So if you see water on a road tonight or tomorrow, the right move is always to turn around, not push through it. Now let's talk about the heat, because over the next 7 days, this is going to be brutal, especially across Texas, Arkansas, and Mississippi. If you live near Dallas, get ready for what feels like the same scorching day on repeat. Temperatures are forecast to climb into the mid to upper hundreds, with today alone expected to hit around 106 degrees in Dallas. And this heat is not staying put. Tomorrow it pushes further north. If you are in Kansas or southwest Missouri near Springfield, you will need sunscreen if you are heading outside, and light clothing because the sun is going to feel relentless. By Wednesday and Thursday, that heat pulls back toward Arkansas, Texas, and Oklahoma as a cold front pushes south, the same front driving Tuesday's and early Wednesday's severe weather. But do not get comfortable, because by the weekend, the heat builds back hard, with Dallas potentially near 110 degrees by Saturday. This is shaping up to be a genuinely dangerous and exhausting stretch of heat for the southern plains. Heat does not get the same attention as a tornado warning, but it kills more people every year than almost any other weather hazard. It does not come with a siren. It builds slowly, day after day, and that is exactly why it catches people off guard. Sustained triple-digit heat with barely any relief overnight puts real strain on the body, especially for anyone working outside, anyone without reliable air conditioning, or anyone who forgets to drink enough water. When Dallas gets close to 110 degrees this weekend, that is not just an uncomfortable afternoon. That is the kind of heat where heat exhaustion and heat stroke become a real risk within a short amount of time outdoors. The short cooldown expected Wednesday and Thursday is a welcome break, but it does not last, and the heat coming back hard by the weekend means this threat is not going away anytime soon. And it is not just Dallas. This kind of heat wave tends to creep into surrounding areas too. So even if you are just outside the main hot zone, do not assume you are safe from it. Keep an eye on your local temperature and humidity together, because high humidity on top of high heat makes it feel even worse and puts more strain on the body than the raw number on the thermometer suggests. If you are in the Midwest or Great Lakes, the story is much nicer. Conditions there should stay pretty comfortable for this time of year, and by the weekend, some spots could even see overnight lows drop into the 40s and 50s. Parts of northern Wisconsin could see lows as cold as the low 40s, thanks to a large area of low pressure sitting up in Canada. That same system will keep sending repeated rounds of storms and rain into the region, but it is also responsible for that unusually pleasant, cooler air behind it. Meanwhile, the tropics stay quiet for now, held back by dry air and unusually strong wind shear, though that could change before the month ends if conditions ease up even a little. And if you are in the Midwest or Great Lakes, you actually get a stretch of genuinely nice weather this week, a rare bright spot in all this. If you live in any of the areas we talked about today, especially the Plains and Midwest corridor for tomorrow, it is worth taking a minute right now to actually think through your plan. Know where the lowest, most protected part of your home is, whether that is a basement or an interior room away from windows. Keep your phone charged and make sure severe weather alerts are turned on, because a tornado warning can sometimes give you only minutes to react. If you're traveling through any of these zones over the next 2 days, check the radar before you leave, rather than after you are already on the road. This is a fast-moving, high-stakes pattern with a lot of moving parts, and details like exact storm timing, rainfall totals, and tornado risk zones could shift as new data comes in. So keep checking for updates instead of relying on just this one forecast. If you are anywhere in these threat zones, make sure you have a way to get severe weather alerts, know where you would shelter if a tornado warning came, and never drive through a flooded road no matter how shallow it looks. Stay safe out there, and we will be back with the next update as this system keeps taking shape.